Imagine the absolute darkest scenario possible, right? It's 1982, and you are literally floating in the pitch black void of the open Atlantic Ocean. In a flash, your life is completely stripped down to a matter of seconds. The decisions you make right now are going to dictate whether you live or die. So today, in this explainer, we're diving into one of the most harrowing, just absolutely incredible, and meticulously documented survival stories in human history. We're talking about the story of Stephen Callahan. And look, this isn't just some tale of getting lucky. No, this is an absolute masterclass in human endurance. Let's get right into it. Our story kicks off with this incredibly frantic, terrifying cold open. Picture this. It's February 5th, middle of the night. Stephen Callahan, who, by the way, is a naval architect, is fast asleep below deck on his self-built 21-foot sailboat, the Napoleon Solo. Out of nowhere, this massive bang shakes the entire hull. He actually suspects he was struck by a whale in the dark, but honestly, it doesn't even matter what it was because the result is catastrophic. The hull is completely breached. Freezing, pitch-dark seawater is just pouring into the cabin way faster than any pump could possibly handle. The boat is going down, and Callahan has exactly 30 seconds to act. Just 30 seconds. Okay, let's dive into this exact moment. What do you grab when literally everything you own is about to sink a mile straight down to the bottom of the ocean? Well, Callahan somehow managed to salvage this specific list: an emergency rubber life raft, a small bag of tools, a spear gun, a few cans of food, and some navigational charts. That's it. He throws the life raft overboard, abandons the sinking Solo, and just watches the only solid thing for 1,000 miles disappear completely beneath the surface. And that brings us to this staggering number, 76. That's the total number of days Callahan would spend drifting totally alone on that tiny 6-foot emergency rubber raft. To put that into perspective for a second, that is 2.5 months of absolute sheer isolation. Now, he did set off his emergency radio beacon, but it was completely ignored. No one picked up the signal. There was absolutely no rescue party out there looking for him. He was just this completely invisible dot out on the vast Atlantic. Which leads us to Section 1, the job of staying alive. Because as you'll see, survival isn't luck, it's engineering. You see, Callahan was uniquely equipped for this nightmare. As a naval architect, he understood systems, and he figured out real quick that survival was going to be a grinding daily job. The absolute very first job on his list, water. His terrifying margin of error was just 1 single pint a day. Keep in mind, drinking seawater will kill you way faster than drinking nothing at all, so he had to rely on these incredibly flimsy inflatable solar stills. They constantly clogged, they constantly leaked, and he literally had to spend hours every single day just nursing them to coax out that 1 single life-saving pint. And his next move brilliantly illustrates his engineering mindset. He was a navigator, right? But he had 0 instruments, so what does he do? He builds one. He creates this improvised sextant purely out of pencils to measure the angle of the stars. It's wild. Now, he couldn't steer his little rubber raft, obviously, but by taking these crude measurements, he could roughly track his agonizingly slow 1,800-mile drift toward the Caribbean. And while it didn't make the raft move any faster, it absolutely gave his hope a direction. This basically became his mechanical daily routine. Step 1, fix those leaking solar stills. Step 2, spear the Dorado fish that began gathering under his raft. Step 3, estimate his ocean position. And Step 4, document the whole ordeal in a diary. Now, real quick, I want you to plant a pin in Step 2, the Dorado fish. Just keep that in the back of your mind because it's going to become incredibly important a little later. But for now, just know he was eating these fish totally raw, alongside literally scraping barnacles off the bottom of his raft for sustenance. Just consider the terrifying reality gap of his situation for a moment. The guy was trying to cross 1,800 nautical miles, but his entire living space was exactly 6 feet across. You can't even stretch out fully. And physically, he was decaying. Over the course of the ordeal, he actually lost roughly 1/3 of his entire body weight as his body basically consumed itself just to keep his brain functioning. Let's move on to Section 2, disaster on day 43. This is what happens when the system completely breaks. So for 6 weeks, Callahan's meticulous routine actually kept him alive. But if we look at the timeline of dread here, we see a clear descent. Day 1, the boat sinks. Day 7, the rescue radio is ignored. By day 20, his grueling survival routine is pretty much set. But then, we hit day 43. While trying to catch food, the very tool keeping him alive, his spear gun, slips. The sharp metal tip slams straight into the side of the raft and punctures the lower buoyancy tube. Suddenly, the raft is sinking and the sharks are circling. I mean, it is a visceral nightmare. The air is hissing out, the ocean is literally creeping over the edge, and he has no backup raft. The man who built a sturdy wooden sailboat now has to somehow save a deflating rubber ring. For days, with completely exhausted, bleeding fingers that are just constantly submerged in the salt water, he fought the leak. He bailed water, he jury-rigged patches, all while knowing, for a fact, that just below the surface, those sharks were waiting for him to fail. But incredibly, by some absolute miracle, the patch barely held. Which brings us to Section 3, Surviving the Sameness. The slow, grueling psychological war. You see, surviving the sinking raft was a massive physical victory, sure, but the physical elements are really only half the battle. He was actually fighting two completely distinct wars. Yes, his body was emaciated, covered in these agonizing saltwater sores, and suffering relentless dehydration. But that second battle, that's what usually kills castaways long before they actually starve: the mind. He was battling the crushing silence, the endless water, the total, complete isolation. Just try to imagine waking up every single day to the exact same empty, flat horizon. No proof that the rest of the world even exists anymore. So, the absolutely crucial point here is how he combated that. As the quote says, he turned an impossible situation into a series of small, doable tasks. This is where that diary became his absolute lifeline. He forced himself to do physical stretches every day just to stave off muscle atrophy. He drew these incredibly detailed, beautiful sketches of his raft and the fish. He tracked the days. By documenting his ordeal, almost as if he were an outside observer, he anchored his sanity. He basically took an utterly uncontrollable environment and found the tiny, microscopic things he could actually control. All right, moving into Section 4, the unlikely rescue on day 76. Remember earlier when I asked you to put a pin in those Dorado fish? Well, here is exactly where that detail pays off in this bizarre, almost unbelievable chain of rescue. So that massive school of Dorado had been using Callahan's raft for shelter for weeks, right? Eventually, that huge gathering of fish attracted a massive flock of ocean birds. Those birds began circling and diving, signaling a huge feeding frenzy. And on April 21st, local fishermen saw those circling birds. They didn't sail out there to look for a missing sailor. No, they sailed out there to catch fish. The crazy thing is, he wasn't found because anyone was actually looking for him. By that point, nobody expected him to still be alive. He was found because the very same ocean that had spent 76 days trying to kill him accidentally supplied a school of fish that ultimately flagged down his rescuers near the island of Marie Galante. It's like a giant puzzle piece falling perfectly into place. It wasn't just luck. It was his absolute refusal to call in sick to the job of staying alive. And that sheer perseverance allowed him to eventually turn his hand-drawn diary into the massive best-selling survival book Adrift. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Look at what it actually takes to survive something like this. It's not about movie hero bravery. It's about bailing water with bleeding hands. It's drinking exactly 1 pint of dirty water a day. It's literally holding your mind together with a pencil and a notebook. So, I leave you with this question. If you were stripped of absolutely everything, placed on a tiny 6-foot raft in the middle of a blank, endless horizon, could you survive the sameness? And would you have the willpower to treat survival as a job?